Welcome to HOA Stories 87. Ryan Mitchell wasn't the kind of man who wanted much from life. He didn't care about big cars or luxury vacations. All he wanted was peace, quiet, and a place he could truly call home. For years, he lived in a cramped apartment in the middle of the city, saving every paycheck. Every time he skipped going out, every time he turned down a trip, he reminded himself it was all for the cabin. His dream. A small wooden cabin by the lake, surrounded by trees and silence, and after all those years of hard work, that dream was finally becoming real. The cabin wasn't huge, but it was perfect. A wooden deck that overlooked the water, a fireplace in the living room, and enough land to give him privacy. For Ryan, it was everything. The day he got the keys, he couldn't stop smiling. He drove out with his pickup truck, the back stacked with boxes, every turn of the gravel road pulling him closer to the life he had always imagined. But as he came around the bend toward the entrance, something didn't feel right. There, standing at the wooden gate, was a man. Stiff posture, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding his eyes even though it wasn't that sunny. Ryan slowed down, squinting. The man stepped forward. Older, maybe in his late 50s, dressed like he was going golfing, polo shirt tucked in, belt tight, and an expression that screamed authority. Ryan rolled down his window, polite as always. "Hey there, I'm Ryan Mitchell, just moving in today." He gestured to the boxes in the back. "This is my new cabin." The man didn't smile, didn't even nod. Instead, he said firmly, "No, you're not moving in today." Ryan blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," the man said. "This property isn't approved. The HOA hasn't signed off on it. You can't move in." Ryan let out a small laugh, thinking maybe this was some kind of mistake. "Sir, I bought this property. I've got the deed, the paperwork, everything's legal." But the man didn't budge. "I'm Gregory, head of the HOA?" He said it like it was supposed to mean something. "And as far as we're concerned, you don't belong here?" Ryan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. His excitement about moving started to fade, replaced by a creeping frustration. "With all due respect, Gregory, this is my land. I paid for it. No HOA approval is needed for me to move into my own home." Gregory tilted his head, a smirk spreading across his face. "That's what you think." And with that, he pulled out his phone. "If you won't listen, maybe you'll listen to the cops." Ryan's chest tightened. He had done nothing wrong, so why was this man calling the police? He sat there in his truck, engine idling, staring at Gregory as he loudly explained to someone on the phone that an unauthorized resident was trying to move into the neighborhood. The word unauthorized echoed in Ryan's head. Unauthorized? How could a man moving into his own home be unauthorized? Minutes felt like hours as Gregory finished the call and slipped his phone back into his pocket. He stood there at the gate, smug as though he had already won. Ryan tried to steady his breathing. This wasn't how his dream was supposed to start. He imagined unloading boxes, setting up furniture, lighting the fireplace, not being stopped at the gate like a TRESPASSER. Then, in the distance, he heard it, the low hum of an engine, the crunch of tires on gravel, the police. Gregory straightened his posture, a satisfied grin on his face. Ryan felt his stomach twist. And this is where I'll pause for a second because I want to ask you something. If you were Ryan, sitting there in your truck with the police on the way, what would you do? Would you argue with Gregory? Drive past him? Or would you sit there and wait? Ryan didn't have long to think. The police SUV pulled up behind him. Lights off, but presence heavy. The officer stepped out, sunglasses on, hand resting casually on his belt. Gregory practically bounced over, waving his arms. "Officer! Over here, this man is trying to break into the neighborhood. He doesn't belong here." Ryan felt his jaw tighten. Break in? That was his cabin. His land? The officer listened patiently, nodding slightly as Gregory ranted. Then he turned and walked toward Ryan's truck. Ryan braced himself. But instead of suspicion, the officer's face broke into a smile. "Mr. Mitchell," he said warmly, "congratulations on your new place. Welcome to the neighborhood." Ryan froze, caught off guard. "Wait, you know about the sale?" The officer nodded. "Of course, everything checked out. Enjoy your cabin." Behind him, Gregory's smug expression crumbled. His mouth opened, but no words came out. "Wait, what?" You can't just let him. The officer's smile faded as he turned to Gregory. Sir, he owns this land. Calling the police for something like this is a waste of our time. Do it again, and you'll be the one in trouble. Gregory's face flushed red. He stammered, then turned away, humiliated. Ryan felt a rush of relief wash over him. He nodded at the officer, then slowly drove through the gate, the gravel crunching under his tires. For the first time that day, he smiled again. The cabin stood waiting for him, sunlight glinting off its windows. His dream wasn't over, it was just beginning. Ryan parked his truck in front of the cabin and stepped out, stretching his legs. The smell of pine trees filled the air, and for a moment he just stood there, soaking it all in. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the start of his new life. But even as he breathed in the peace of the woods, he couldn't shake off the image of Gregory's face. That look of smug authority, then the shock when the officer sided with him. Ryan knew men like Gregory. They weren't the type to just back off after losing once. Still, Ryan wasn't about to let anyone ruin this day. He unloaded his boxes, carried them inside, and lit the fireplace. The cabin felt alive again, filled with warmth, the crackle of wood, and the smell of fresh beginnings. Later that evening, as Ryan sipped a cup of coffee on the porch, he noticed movement near the gate. A figure walking quickly, shoulders stiff, Gregory. Even from a distance, Ryan could feel the man's anger. Gregory didn't come up to the porch. Instead, he stood at the edge of the road and shouted, "This isn't over, Mitchell. You'll regret moving in here." Ryan sighed, shaking his head. "Some welcome committee," he muttered. He didn't bother shouting back. Why give Gregory the satisfaction? Instead, he closed the door and went to bed, determined to enjoy his first night in the cabin. The next morning, Ryan woke to the sound of hammering. Confused, he stepped outside. And there it was, a brand new sign nailed onto a post near the road. HOA rules enforced trespassers will be fined. Ryan felt his chest tighten. He walked over, ran his hand across the fresh wood, and laughed bitterly. This wasn't even subtle. Gregory was trying to intimidate him, but Ryan wasn't the type to back down. He pulled out his phone, snapped a picture of the sign, and made a mental note. If this is how he wants to play, fine. But two can play this game. The day passed quickly as Ryan settled in, arranging furniture, unpacking, and getting used to the quiet. But as night fell, the silence outside didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt tense. Around 10 p.m., headlights swept across his cabin. Walls. Ryan froze, peering out the window. A black SUV sat idling near the gate. He couldn't see who was inside, but he had a good guess. Gregory. The SUV didn't move for almost half an hour. Just sat there, engine running, lights on, watching. Ryan clenched his fists. This wasn't normal neighborly behavior. This was harassment. The next morning he decided to take action. He drove into town, went straight to the county office, and asked about HOA authority. The clerk, an older woman with glasses, pulled out a thick folder and gave him the news he was hoping for. "Sir, your cabin and land are outside the official HOA jurisdiction. They have no legal authority over you." Ryan felt relief wash over him. "So, if they try to find me or stop me?" She shook her head. "They can't. They might try to scare you, but legally? They have nothing." That was all Ryan needed to hear. He thanked her, grabbed a copy of the documents, and drove back to his cabin with a smile, but his smile faded the second he saw what waited for him at the gate. A crowd. At least 10 people stood there, neighbors, all of them. Some held clipboards, some crossed their arms like Gregory. And right in the center, of course, was Gregory himself. As Ryan slowed his truck, Gregory stepped forward, waving his arms like a conductor commanding an orchestra. "Here he is, folks. The man who thinks he's above the rules. The man who refuses to be a good neighbor." Ryan killed the engine and got out, holding the county documents in his hand. He glanced around at the faces staring at him. Some looked hostile, others are uncertain. Gregory raised his voice. "Ryan Mitchell believes he can do whatever he wants. No rules, no respect for the community. Is this the kind of person we want living here?" Ryan took a deep breath. He wasn't about to let Gregory control the narrative. "Actually," Ryan said firmly, holding up the papers, "I have proof from the county. My property is outside the HOA's jurisdiction. You have no authority over me." There was a murmur through the crowd. Some neighbors looked at each other. Confused, a woman whispered, "Is that true?" Gregory's face turned red. He snatched the papers from Ryan's hand, scanning them quickly. His jaw tightened. He knew it was real. But instead of admitting it, he crumpled the papers in his fist. "This doesn't matter." Gregory snapped. "Rules are rules, and if he refuses to follow them, then we'll make his life miserable until he leaves." Ryan stared at him, stunned at the open hostility. Some neighbors nodded in agreement, while others shuffled uncomfortably, clearly not wanting to be part of this. And this is where I want to pause for a second because I want to ask you something. If you were Ryan, standing in front of a whole group led by a man determined to drive you out, what would you do? Would you fight back, ignore them, or start planning revenge? Ryan didn't answer out loud, but in his heart he knew. He wasn't leaving. Not now, not ever. He looked Gregory straight in the eyes and said calmly, "You can try all you want. But this cabin is mine, and I'm not going anywhere." The crowd shifted, some impressed by his calm, others muttering under their breath. Gregory, though, wasn't done. His smile returned, thin and dangerous. "Fine," he said coldly. "We'll see how long you last." And with that, the crowd slowly dispersed, leaving Ryan standing at the gate, his crumpled papers in the dirt. Ryan picked them up, smoothed them out, and walked back to his cabin. His mind was racing. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was a battle. And Gregory had just declared war. The night after the confrontation, Ryan lay awake in bed, staring at the wooden beams of the cabin ceiling. The silence wasn't comforting anymore. It felt heavy, like the forest itself was holding its breath. He kept replaying the scene in his mind. The crowd, Gregory's smug face, the way some neighbors looked unsure while others seemed eager to join in. It wasn't just Gregory anymore. It was the entire HOA, ready to make his life miserable. Ryan sat up, rubbed his eyes, and muttered, "If they want to fight, they've got one." The next morning, Ryan decided to go about his day normally, refusing to show fear. He chopped firewood, repaired a few loose planks on the porch, and even whistled while he worked. But he didn't have to wait long before Gregory struck again. Around noon, Ryan heard a loud knock on his door. He opened it to find two uniformed men standing there, not cops, HOA security. They wore matching polo shirts with the HOA logo stitched on the chest and clipboards in hand. One of them cleared his throat. "Mr. Mitchell, we're here on behalf of the Homeowners Association. We've received multiple complaints already, noise violations, unauthorized structures, and, environmental disturbances." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Environmental disturbances? I was chopping wood." The man didn't flinch. "Sir, rules are rules. If you refuse to comply, we'll have to escalate." Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. "You know you have no authority here, right? I already checked with the county." The second security guy looked nervous, but the first one puffed out his chest. "Maybe so, but Gregory told us to make it clear you're not welcome." And with that, they turned and left, their SUV tires spitting gravel as they drove away. Ryan stood on the porch, arms crossed. So that's the game. Fake complaints, fake authority. Fine, let's see how far they take this. That night, Ryan cooked dinner and tried to relax. But halfway through his meal, the cabin lights flickered and went out. Ryan grabbed a flashlight, stepped outside, and traced the power line. His stomach dropped. The wires had been cut. Clean, deliberate, anger boiled in his chest. He knew exactly who was behind it. He called the electric company first thing in the morning. They confirmed what he suspected. The damage wasn't an accident. Someone had tampered with the lines. It would take at least a day to repair. Ryan spent that night in the dark, his only light coming from the fireplace. But instead of feeling defeated, his resolve hardened. He wasn't just defending a house. He was defending his right to live, free from bullies like Gregory. The following morning, Ryan drove into town to buy supplies: extra locks, motion sensor lights, and a few security cameras. He wasn't going to sit back and let them keep chipping away at him. When he returned, though, he found something waiting for him at the cabin gate, another sign. This one was larger, painted in bold red letters, "Property under HOA review, entry PROHIBIT." Ryan laughed out loud. Under review? By whom? Gregory? He ripped the sign out of the ground, tossed it aside, and drove in. But the harassment didn't stop. 2 days later, He came home to find trash scattered across his driveway, bags torn open, garbage spilling everywhere. He cleaned it up, gritting his teeth, knowing it wasn't a coincidence. The next day, someone nailed flyers to nearby trees. Warning, dangerous neighbor refuses community RULE. Ryan realized Gregory was running a full campaign against him. It wasn't just intimidation, it was character assassination. Ryan sat on the porch one evening, sipping coffee, when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You don't belong here. Sell the cabin and leave before it gets worse." Ryan stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. He wanted to throw the phone against the wall. Instead, he took a deep breath and forced himself to think logically. Gregory was escalating because he felt threatened. Ryan had the upper hand legally, and Gregory knew it. That's why he was resorting to scare tactics. Still, Ryan couldn't ignore the fact that he was outnumbered. Gregory had the HOA board and neighbors, and even hired security. Ryan had himself. For the first time, he wondered, how far are they willing to go? That question was answered a few nights later. Ryan was woken around 3 a.m. by the sound of footsteps outside. He grabbed his flashlight, crept to the window, and peered out. 3 figures, dressed in dark clothing, were moving around his truck. One of them pulled out a knife, slashing the tires. Another shook a can of spray paint, scrawling something across the side. Ryan's blood ran cold. This wasn't just petty harassment anymore. This was destruction. He burst out the door, flashlight in hand, shouting, "Hey, get away from there!" The figures scattered like startled animals, sprinting into the trees. Ryan caught only a glimpse of one face in the beam of his light, and his heart sank. It was a kid. Maybe 17, 18, Gregory. Wasn't just fighting his own battle anymore. He was pulling in others, using the younger neighbors as pawns. Ryan walked over to his truck, shining the flashlight on the damage. The words sprayed across the side made his stomach twist. "Get out." Ryan stood there in the cold night air, fists clenched, chest heaving. He felt anger, yes, but underneath it, a growing determination. He wasn't going to run. He wasn't going to let Gregory win. If they wanted war, they were going to get it. The morning after the vandalism, Ryan stood silently in front of his damaged truck. The slashed tires and the crude red letters sprayed across the side, they were a message. Gregory wasn't bluffing anymore. Ryan crouched down, running his fingers along the sharp cuts in the rubber. "Cowards," he muttered under his breath. He wasn't just angry, he felt something deeper, a stubborn defiance rising inside him. He grabbed his phone, snapped a dozen photos from different angles, then walked around the property, documenting everything: the cut power line, the discarded flyers, and the ripped trash bags he'd saved as evidence. For the first time since moving in, Ryan stopped reacting. Instead, he started planning. That afternoon, he drove into town and stopped at the sheriff's office. The deputy on duty, a middle-aged woman named Officer Linda Reyes, listened carefully as Ryan explained everything: the HOI threats, the harassment, the power outage, and now the vandalism. She frowned, flipping through the photos on his phone. "You've got a solid case here," she said. "But it'll be hard to pin this directly on Gregory unless we catch him or his people in the act." Ryan leaned forward. "So what do you suggest?" Linda crossed her arms. "Set up cameras. Get proof. Once we have names, we can charge them with harassment, trespassing, property damage, you name it. But for now, document everything. Don't engage directly." Ryan nodded slowly. It wasn't the immediate justice he wanted, but it was a plan. He left the station with a new resolve. On his way home, he bought 2 high-quality security cameras, a trail cam for the woods, and even a voice recorder. If Gregory wanted a war, Ryan would fight it with evidence. That night, as he mounted the cameras and checked the angles, he felt a strange sense of empowerment. For the first time, he wasn't just reacting. He was preparing. 2 days later, his patience paid off. It was just past midnight when Ryan's phone buzzed with a motion alert. He grabbed it off the nightstand, squinting at the grainy footage. The trail cam had caught 2 figures creeping along the property line, flashlights in hand. He zoomed in, and his jaw tightened. One of them was unmistakably Gregory. Ryan downloaded the clip, saved it twice, and let out a low laugh. "Gotcha!" The next morning, he went about his day like normal, chopping wood. repairing the fence, whistling as though nothing had happened. But inside, he was buzzing with energy. Gregory had slipped up. Later that evening, Ryan headed into town for groceries. He was halfway through the store when he noticed a familiar face, one of the teenagers who had vandalized his truck. The boy froze when he saw Ryan, his expression a mix of fear and guilt. Ryan walked straight up to him, lowering his voice so only the kid could hear. "Tell Gregory I've got him on camera, and next time it won't be just a warning." The boy's face drained of color. He nodded quickly and hurried out of the store, leaving his basket behind. When Ryan returned home, he found another note pinned to his cabin door. "You think cameras will save you? This is our community. Leave before it's too late." Ryan ripped the note down and crumpled it in his fist. He was done playing defense. That night, he sat at his kitchen table, staring at the evidence folder on his laptop. Photos, videos, timestamps, all neatly organized. He could march into the sheriff's office the next morning and file charges, but a thought gnawed at him. If he moved too soon, Gregory might spin the story, rally the board, and drag things into endless legal disputes. No, Ryan decided. He needed Gregory to hang himself. He needed him desperate enough to make a mistake so big that the whole HOA turned against him. And that chance came sooner than Ryan expected. 3 nights later, another motion alert woke him. This time, the cameras caught something bolder. Gregory and 2 men from the HOA board weren't just snooping, they were trying to install a lock on his gate. Ryan grabbed his flashlight, slipped on his boots, and stormed outside. "Caught you red-handed, Gregory," Ryan shouted, his voice booming through the night. The men froze like deer in headlights. Gregory recovered first, sneering. "This is community property. You can't just lock us out." Ryan held up his phone, the red recording light blinking. "Funny, because the county deed says otherwise. And I've got video proof of you trespassing." One of the board members shifted uncomfortably. "Greg, maybe we should—" "Quiet," Gregory snapped. His face was flushed, sweat glistening on his forehead. "This man is a threat. He doesn't belong here." Ryan stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to twist the knife. "You're finished, Gregory, and you know it." Gregory's jaw clenched. For a moment, Ryan thought he might actually swing at him. But instead, Gregory turned on his heel and stormed off into the night, the other 2 trailing behind like scolded children. Ryan stood at the gate, breathing hard, the cool night air filling his lungs. For the first time, he felt the tide turning. Gregory was losing control, and soon the whole neighborhood would see it. 2 weeks passed in a tense silence. Gregory hadn't set foot on Ryan's property again, but the air in the neighborhood felt charged, like a thunderstorm waiting to break. Ryan knew it wasn't over. Gregory was plotting something bigger. The confirmation came on a Thursday afternoon. A folded letter appeared in Ryan's mailbox, stamped with the HOA seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Mandatory HOA board meeting, Friday, 7 p.m. at the clubhouse. Attendance required. Matter concerning homeowner Ryan Mitchell to be addressed. Ryan read it twice, then set it down slowly. So this was it. Gregory was going public. That evening, Ryan called Officer Reyes. He explained the situation, his suspicions, and the way Gregory had been cornered. "Sounds like he's trying to rally the troops," Reyes said, her voice calm but firm. "Just keep your cool. Don't give him any ammo. And if things escalate, call me." Ryan thanked her, then sat back in his chair, staring at the fire crackling in the wood stove. He could already picture it, Gregory standing in front of the whole HOA, twisting the truth, painting Ryan as the aggressor. But Ryan wasn't afraid anymore. He had something Gregory didn't. Evidence. When Friday evening came, Ryan parked outside the clubhouse and took a deep breath. The small building glowed with warm light, voices carrying out into the night. Inside, almost every seat was filled. Couples whispered to each other, arms crossed. A few glanced up when Ryan walked in, their expressions unreadable. Gregory was already at the front, standing behind a long table like a self-appointed judge. Beside him sat 2 other board members, clearly nervous. Well, Gregory said loudly, his voice dripping with smugness. "The man of the hour has arrived." Ryan ignored the jab and found a seat near the back. Gregory cleared his throat and banged a gavel on the table. "This meeting has been called to address a serious matter. a matter that threatens the harmony and safety of our community. A matter concerning this man Ryan Mitchell. All eyes turned toward Ryan. He sat still, arms folded, letting Gregory have his stage. Gregory launched into a performance worthy of a politician. He spoke of community values, safety concerns, and a reckless newcomer who refuses to respect the rules. He pointed at Ryan's cameras, calling them an invasion of privacy. He described Ryan as aggressive, uncooperative, and even dangerous. Some heads nodded, others frowned. A few whispered. Then Gregory pulled out a stack of papers. "We, the board, have drafted a motion to restrict Mr. Mitchell's use of his property. He will not be permitted to install barriers, cameras, or any other hostile structures. Furthermore, we are reviewing his residency application for violations." The room buzzed with murmurs. Ryan felt the heat rise in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had planned for this. When Gregory finally paused, Ryan stood. "May I speak?" Gregory smirked. "By all means, defend yourself." Ryan walked slowly to the front, pulling a small USB stick from his pocket. He handed it to the woman running the projector. "Please play the first video." The screen flickered to life. Grainy night footage appeared. Gregory and two men trespassing on Ryan's property, trying to install the illegal lock. Gasps echoed through the room. Ryan's voice cut through the silence. "You say I'm aggressive, dangerous, but the truth is, this man has been leading harassment against me since the day I arrived. He slashed my tires. He vandalized my truck. He cut my power. And when that didn't work, he tried to take my property by force." He clicked to the next video. Gregory skulking along the fence line, flashlight in hand. Then the next, two teenagers spray painting his truck. Ryan's tone stayed calm, but every word hit like a hammer. "I didn't want this fight. I came here for peace, to live quietly, but this is bullying, and I won't be bullied." The room erupted. People whispered sharply, pointing at Gregory. The board members shifted in their chairs, clearly uncomfortable. Gregory's face turned crimson. "Lies!" he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "He's twisting everything. You can't believe this," but no one was listening anymore. The tide had turned. One woman stood from the crowd. "Gregory, you've been HOA president for years, but I've never seen this kind of behavior. Is this what you've been doing? Behind our backs?" Another man chimed in. "I helped vote for you, and this is how you treat people? Trespassing? Vandalism? What's wrong with you?" The whispers became shouts. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Gregory tried to regain control, waving his arms and yelling over the noise. But it was useless. The board members leaned in close, whispered something to each other, and then one of them cleared his throat. This meeting is adjourned. Effective immediately, the board will review Gregory's conduct as president." Gasps again. Ryan stood tall, watching as Gregory's mask finally cracked. His smug smile was gone, replaced by a wild, desperate glare as the crowd dispersed. People came up to Ryan, shaking his hand and patting his shoulder. "Good job standing up. We didn't know. You did the right thing," but Ryan barely heard them. His eyes stayed locked on Gregory, who stood at the front, fists clenched, his entire world collapsing around him. Ryan knew it wasn't over, not yet. Gregory was too proud and too angry to give up without a final fight. And when that fight came, Ryan would be ready. The night after the HOA meeting felt strangely quiet. Ryan sat on his porch with a mug of coffee, the crickets chirping in the distance, the lake reflecting a thin slice of moonlight. For the first time since moving in, he felt a flicker of relief, but deep down he knew better. Gregory wasn't the type to admit defeat. The confirmation came sooner than expected. At 3 a.m., a sudden crash jolted Ryan awake. He grabbed his flashlight and hurried to the front door. His truck windscreen was shattered, glass glittering across the driveway like broken ice. A rock lay inside the cab, wrapped in paper. Ryan picked it up and unrolled it. The words were scrawled in thick black marker, "Get out, last warning." His chest tightened, not with fear, but with anger. He knew exactly who was behind it. The next morning, he called Officer Reyes again. She came out, surveyed the damage, and sighed. "Looks like someone's getting desperate. But don't worry, we're keeping a close eye. Gregory's on thin ice." Ryan nodded, but inside his resolve hardened. This wasn't about broken glass anymore. This was war. 2 days later, he discovered something worse. His electricity had been cut again. But this time, when he followed the line into the woods, he found the cord hacked clean with bolt cutters, tossed carelessly onto the ground. He bent down, examining the cut. Then he noticed something nearby, a muddy footprint, deep in the soil, leading toward Gregory's property. Ryan pulled out his phone and snapped photos. That evening, as he sat with candles burning inside the cabin, he thought about everything. Gregory had done the slashed tires, the harassment, the vandalism, and now this. And he realized something. It wasn't enough to defend himself anymore. He had to end this once and for all. The next day, he visited the county courthouse. He filed for a restraining order against Gregory, attaching every piece of evidence, video footage, photos, even the threatening note. The clerk looked surprised as she flipped through the stack. "You've got more than enough here," she said. "We'll fast-track it." Ryan left the courthouse with a copy of the filing in his hand. For the first time, he felt like the system might finally back him up, but Gregory wasn't done yet. That evening, as Ryan returned from town, he noticed a group of neighbors gathered at the edge of his driveway. Gregory was at the center, his arms waving, his voice booming. "He's lying to you," Gregory shouted. "That meeting was a setup. He's not the victim, he's the problem. He's trying to take over our community." Ryan parked and stepped out of his truck. All eyes turned toward him. "You want to tell them the truth, Gregory?" Ryan called out, his voice steady. "Or should I show them the restraining order I just filed against you?" the crowd murmured. Gregory's face twisted, his composure cracking. "He's bluffing." Ryan pulled the document from his jacket pocket and held it up. "Not bluffing. The county sheriff will have a copy of this by morning." Gasps. A few neighbors stepped back from Gregory, suddenly unsure. Gregory's chest heaved, his fists clenching at his sides. For a moment, Ryan thought he might actually lunge at him right there. But instead, Gregory spun on his heel and stormed off. Muttering curses under his breath, the neighbors lingered, awkward and uneasy, then drifted away one by one. Ryan stood alone in the driveway, the restraining order still in his hand. That night, as he locked up the cabin, he whispered to himself, "This is ending soon, one way or another." And in the shadows beyond the tree line, Gregory watched, his eyes burning with hate, already plotting his next move. The following week passed in uneasy silence. Ryan tried to settle back into his routine, unpacking boxes, fixing the porch railing, even fishing off the dock to clear his head. But no matter how calm the lake looked, he could feel the storm building. Gregory was too quiet. And Ryan had learned something about Gregory. Silence meant plotting. That Friday night, the storm finally broke. It was close to midnight when Ryan heard a faint crunch of gravel outside. He glanced through the window, and his blood ran cold. Two shadowy figures were moving toward his cabin. One carried a crowbar, the other a gasoline can. Ryan's heart hammered. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was arson. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911, whispering into the receiver. "It's Mitchell, Lakewood Cabin Road. Gregory's here with someone. They're trying to burn my house down." The operator's voice was calm. "Stay inside. Officers are on the way." But Ryan wasn't about to sit back and watch his home burn. He slipped quietly out the back door, circling wide through the trees until he had a clear line of sight. The two men stood on the porch now. Gregory held the crowbar, prying at the doorframe, while the other unscrewed the gas can lid. "Make it fast," Gregory hissed. "We'll light it and be gone before anyone notices." Ryan's blood boiled. He stepped from the shadows, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. "Drop it, Gregory." The men spun, startled. Gregory's face twisted in rage. "You just don't learn, do you?" He lunged forward with the crowbar. Ryan dodged, the metal whistling past his head. Adrenaline surged as he tackled Gregory, both of them crashing onto the porch. The crowbar clanged to the ground. The second man hesitated, gasoline sloshing in his can. For a moment, Ryan thought he'd pour it anyway, but then the sound of approaching sirens split the night. Red and blue lights flashed through the trees. Tires screeched. "On gravel? Freeze?" Officer Reyes shouted as she and two deputies leapt from their vehicles. "Hands where we can see them!" The accomplice dropped the gas can instantly, throwing his hands up. Gregory, breathing hard beneath Ryan's grip, tried to squirm free. But Reyes was on him in seconds, snapping cuffs around his wrists. "You're done, Gregory," she growled. "Breaking and entering, attempted arson, assault, you're looking at years behind bars?" Gregory spat on the porch, his eyes blazing with hatred. "This isn't over, you hear me, Mitchell? This isn't." Reyes yanked him to his feet, cutting him off. "Oh, it's over." The deputies hauled both men toward the patrol cars. Gregory fought every step of the way, but it didn't matter now. The law had finally caught up. Ryan stood on his porch, chest heaving, watching the flashing lights fade into the distance. The silence that followed was different this time. Not threatening, liberating. For the first time since moving in, he felt safe. Later, Officer Reyes returned, clipboard in hand. "You handled yourself well tonight," she said, scribbling notes. "But next time, don't be a hero. Call us and wait inside." Ryan managed a weary smile. "If I hadn't stopped him, I might not have had a house left to protect." Reyes sighed but nodded. "Fair point. Either way, Gregory's finished. He won't be seeing daylight for a long time." As she left, Ryan sank into a porch chair. Exhausted but victorious, the night air felt lighter. The crickets chirped again. And for the first time in weeks, he knew the nightmare was truly ending. Still, as he gazed out across the dark water, a thought whispered in the back of his mind. How many other neighbors had Gregory bullied before him? And how many more stories like this were hidden in quiet communities across the country? The next morning, the lakefront community buzzed with whispers. News of Gregory's arrest had spread like wildfire. Some residents stood in small clusters by the road, talking in hushed tones. Others peeked from behind curtains, watching police cars come and go. Everyone had the same stunned expression, disbelief. That Gregory, the man who had acted untouchable for years, was now sitting in a jail cell. Ryan walked into town later that day to pick up supplies. As he stepped into the small general store, conversation stopped. Heads turned. For a long, awkward moment, no one spoke. Then an older woman near the counter finally broke the silence. "You're the new cabin owner, right?" she asked. Ryan nodded. "That's me." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Is it true? Gregory tried to burn your house down?" Ryan hesitated, then gave a small nod. The woman gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. "Lord have mercy, I always knew he was a bully, but this—" Soon others crowded around. A man in a baseball cap shook his head. "He fined me $300 last year for leaving my boat trailer in the driveway. He said he owned the rules. Guess he thought he owned the law, too," another woman spoke up. "He once threatened to sue me because my wind chimes were too loud. Can you imagine?" Wind chimes. The stories poured out, one after another. For years, Gregory had used fear and authority to keep everyone in line. But now that the spell was broken, people finally felt free to speak. Ryan listened, surprised. He wasn't the only one who had suffered. He was just the first to stand. Up to Gregory and Wynn. By evening, the HOA board called an emergency meeting at the clubhouse. For once, the parking lot was full. Neighbors who had avoided these gatherings for years showed up, eager to see what would happen next. Inside, the mood was electric. People filled every seat, some standing against the back wall. The board president, a nervous man named Harold, tapped the microphone. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "As you've probably heard, our former enforcement officer Gregory has been arrested on multiple charges. Effective immediately, he has been removed from all HOA duties." The room erupted in applause. Some even cheered. Ryan, sitting near the back, couldn't help but smile. Harold raised his hands, trying to calm the crowd. "I know this has been a difficult time for everyone. Gregory's actions do not represent this community. We want to rebuild trust, and that starts tonight." A woman in the front row stood up. "Rebuild trust? How about apologizing for letting Gregory terrorize us for years?" The room murmured in agreement. Harold swallowed hard. "You're right. We failed to act sooner. For that, we're truly sorry." Another man shouted, "Then dissolve the HOA. We don't need it." The suggestion sparked debate. Some cheered at the idea of freedom. Others worried about what might happen without rules. But everyone agreed on one thing. Gregory's reign was over. Ryan sat quietly, taking it all in. For the first time, people weren't afraid to challenge authority. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact were now laughing, venting, and even bonding over shared struggles. The community felt alive again. After the meeting, several residents approached Ryan personally. "You saved us," one woman said sincerely. Ryan shook his head. "I didn't save anyone. I just protected my home," she smiled. "Sometimes that's all it takes, one person standing up." As Ryan drove back to his cabin, headlights cutting through the trees, he felt a weight lifting. The nightmare wasn't just over for him, it was over for everyone. That night, he stood on his porch looking out at the still water. For the first time since moving in, the lake felt truly peaceful, but in the quiet, another thought crossed his mind. Gregory might be behind bars, but men like him always seemed to find a way back. Would the community stay strong without him? Or was this just the calm before another storm? The courthouse smelt faintly of polished wood and old paper. Ryan had never been inside before, but today he sat stiffly in the front row. Watching as Gregory was led into the room in handcuffs. Gone was the smug, commanding man who had blocked the cabin gate just weeks earlier. His once pristine blazer was wrinkled, his hair unkempt. But the scowl was still there, the same look of superiority he'd worn when he thought he controlled the whole neighborhood. The judge entered, and the courtroom rose. Everyone sat down again as the charges were read aloud. Arson attempt, trespassing, harassment, misuse of HOA funds. Gasps echoed through the room at that last one. Ryan glanced at the row behind him. Several neighbors were whispering furiously. Misuse of funds? That was news even to him. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman with a stack of files, stood up. "Your Honor, the evidence will show that Gregory abused his authority as an HOA officer for personal gain. He targeted residents, extorted fines, and when challenged, resorted to intimidation, even attempted arson." Gregory's lawyer, a tired man in a cheap suit, rose to respond. "My client denies these accusations. He was simply enforcing community rules. Any financial discrepancies are bookkeeping errors, not fraud." The judge raised an eyebrow. "We'll see." The trial unfolded over hours. Witness after witness took the stand. First was Marlene, the woman with the wind chimes. Her voice trembled at first but grew steadier as she described Gregory pounding on her door, demanding she remove them or face daily fines. He said he'd make my life miserable if I didn't obey. Then came Carl, the man with the boat trailer. He told how Gregory had threatened to tow his property without notice. "I paid the fine, but he never gave me a receipt. Now I know why." Each story painted the same picture. A man drunk on power, exploiting fear to fill his pockets. Finally, it was Ryan's turn. He walked to the stand, palms sweaty but resolve firm. The prosecutor nodded encouragingly. "Mr. Mitchell, can you tell the court what happened on the day you moved into your cabin?" Ryan took a deep breath. "I was driving up with my belongings when Gregory blocked the gate. He told me I couldn't move in, that the HOA didn't approve. When I refused to back down, he called the police. Later, he tried to intimidate me again, and when that failed, he came to my property with gasoline." The courtroom buzzed. Ryan continued. "If the police hadn't caught him that night, my cabin would be ashes?" Gregory's lawyer objected weakly. "Speculation." But the prosecutor held up a photo of the gas can, still smelling of fuel when officers seized it. "Not speculation. Evidence." Ryan locked eyes with Gregory. For the first time, he saw something different, their arrogance, not rage, but fear. The defense tried to downplay it all. They claimed Gregory had been overzealous, that he cared too much about rules, but the jury didn't buy it. The mountain of testimony, the financial records showing thousands missing from HOA accounts, and the attempted arson charge painted a clear picture. When closing arguments ended, the jury left to deliberate. The room held its breath. Less than 2 hours later, they returned. The foreman stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Gregory Hensley, guilty on all counts." A collective gasp filled the courtroom, followed by murmurs of relief. Ryan felt his chest unclench for the first time in weeks. The judge's gavel struck. "Gregory Hensley, you are hereby sentenced to 10 years in state prison with no possibility of early release. May this serve as a warning to those who abuse positions of trust." The bailiff led Gregory away, his protests echoing down the hall. "This isn't over." "You'll regret this." But no one believed him anymore. As the courtroom emptied, Ryan stepped outside into the sunlight. Neighbors surrounded him, clapping his shoulder, thanking him. For them, it was more than just Gregory going to jail. It was the end of years of fear, but for Ryan, it was personal. His cabin, his peace, his dream finally safe. That night, back at the lake, Ryan sat by the fire with a quiet smile. The nightmare was truly over, or was it? He couldn't shake Gregory's final words. This isn't over. Then the news spread across the neighborhood like wildfire. Gregory was gone for years. His shadow had loomed over the lake community, but with his sentencing, the grip was broken. The very next morning, flyers appeared on every mailbox. Emergency HOA meeting, election of new board, Friday, 7 p.m. at the clubhouse. Ryan stared at the flyer tacked to his own mailbox. Part of him wanted to ignore it, to simply enjoy the peace he had fought for. But another part whispered, if you don't step up, someone else might abuse the power again. Friday evening, the clubhouse filled to bursting. Neighbors who hadn't dared show their faces at meetings before now crowded. The rows, buzzing with cautious optimism. Marlene raised her hand. We need a board that represents everyone, not just people who want control, Carl chimed in. And we need transparency. No more hidden fines, no more disappearing funds. Heads nodded all around. The election began. Names were nominated. Marlene for treasurer, Carl for property chair, and a quiet retired teacher named Janice for secretary. And then, almost unexpectedly, someone shouted, Ryan for president. All eyes turned to him. He froze, the cup of coffee in his hand trembling. I just moved here. I don't know if... But the room erupted in encouragement. You stood up to Gregory. You fought for fairness. You've already proven you care. Ryan felt heat rising in his face. He wanted to say no, but he thought of the cabin, of the fight he had endured, of the fire that almost consumed his dream. If he walked away now, would everything slip back into chaos? He stood slowly. If you trust me, I'll serve. But only if we all commit to making this community better. Together. Applause thundered. The vote was taken, unanimous. Ryan was now president of the HOA. The next weeks were a whirlwind. The new board set to work dismantling Gregory's oppressive system. Old bogus fines were canceled. Residents who had been strong-armed into paying fees were reimbursed from the recovered accounts. The bylaws were rewritten to protect homeowners instead of punishing them. One Saturday morning, Ryan and the board hosted a community barbecue by the lake. Families gathered with food, kids splashed in the water, and for the first time in years, there was laughter instead of fear. Marlene strung her wind chimes again, and no one said a word except a little girl who ran up and said, they sound pretty. Carl parked his boat trailer proudly in his driveway, and the neighbors just waved. It wasn't perfect. Disagreements still popped up, but the tone had changed. Disputes were handled with respect, not threats. Decisions were voted on openly. People began to believe in the idea of community again. One evening, Ryan sat on his porch overlooking the water. The sun dipped low, painting the lake in gold. He sipped his coffee and thought back on everything. Gregory's smirk, the courtroom drama, the fire that almost was. He shook his head with a small smile. Never thought I'd end up here. A knock came at his door. It was Janice, the secretary. She carried a binder. Ryan, we need your signature on the new bylaws draft. He flipped through the pages. Transparency clauses, spending caps, rules requiring majority approval for any enforcement. Exactly the safeguards they'd needed. All along. As he signed, Janice said softly, you know, people trust you now. You've given them hope. Ryan looked out at the water again. Hope's a start, but we'll have to keep earning it. That night, the stars reflected on the lake's still surface. For the first time, the place felt like home, not just to Ryan, but to everyone still in the quiet. Gregory's last words echoed faintly in Ryan's memory. This isn't over. Gregory sat on the hard metal bunk, staring at the cracked concrete wall of his jail cell. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a sound that never seemed to stop. 3 months into his sentence, he still hadn't accepted it. In his mind, he wasn't a criminal. He was a leader, the only one who knew how to keep that neighborhood in order. But now? Now he was just inmate #44219. His cellmate, a wiry man named Vince, leaned back against the bars. You keep pacing like that, old man, and you'll wear a hole in the floor, Gregory snapped. Don't call me old man. I ran a whole community, dozens of families, hundreds of homes. I had power. Vince smirked. Yeah? And now you've got a gray jumpsuit and cold beans for dinner? Power, huh? Gregory's jaw clenched. He hated being mocked. But deep down, he also knew he wasn't done. Not yet. At night, when the cell block grew quiet, he would lie awake and whisper to himself, "They'll see. They'll regret crossing me. Ryan thinks he's won, but I'll take it all back." One evening, during recreation hour in the yard, Gregory struck up a conversation with another inmate, Marcus, a broad-shouldered man with tattoos creeping up his neck. Marcus had once been part of a property scam, and when Gregory explained his HOA history, Marcus laughed. "You're telling me you ran a mini dictatorship in some lake neighborhood? Man, that's wild." Gregory leaned closer. "Not just a neighborhood, it was mine, and I'll get it back. All I need is leverage." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Leverage? Out there, you're just another ex-con." "Nobody listens to ex-cons unless you've got dirt," Gregory smirked. "Oh, I've got dirt, records, documents, and friends still on the outside." In truth, Gregory had spent years collecting information on every homeowner. Financial troubles, zoning violations, even little secrets whispered at HOA meetings. He kept files, copies locked away in places no one knew. If he could get access to those files again, he could still cause chaos. But there was a bigger problem. Ryan Mitchell. Every time Gregory thought of Ryan, his blood boiled. That smug look when the cop sided with him. The applause at the election meeting. Ryan, the outsider, had stolen everything from him. Late one night, Vince asked casually, "So what's your endgame when you get out?" Gregory's eyes gleamed. "Simple. Take back control. Tear down Mitchell. And remind those ungrateful neighbors who their real leader is?" Vince chuckled darkly. "You sound obsessed." Gregory didn't deny it. "I built that community. Without me, it'll collapse. They'll come crawling back, mark my words." Meanwhile, letters began arriving at the HOA office unsigned, but with threats scrawled in bold handwriting. "You think you're safe without me? You're not. This board will fail. Ryan will fail." Marlene brought one of the letters. "T.O. Ryan, do you think it's him?" Ryan studied the uneven handwriting, his gut twisted. "It has to be. He's not letting go." The board debated reporting it to the police, but Ryan stopped them. "No, we can't show fear." That's exactly what he wants. Still, at night, Ryan found himself double-checking the locks on his cabin door. Back in the jail, Gregory smirked every time he sealed an envelope. He wasn't free yet, but his shadow still reached beyond the bars, and with every letter, every reminder of his presence, he felt stronger. "Enjoy your little victory, Mitchell," he whispered to the ceiling. "Because when I walk out of here, it's over for you." Life at the lake seemed quieter after Gregory's arrest. For the first time in years, residents walked their dogs without looking over their shoulders. Kids rode bikes. On the gravel roads, laughter echoing under the tall pines. At the cabin, Ryan settled into a routine. He'd wake early, brew coffee on the porch, and watch the mist roll off the lake. Sometimes he'd help Marlene with HOA paperwork. Sometimes he'd join neighbors for barbecues. "Feels like a fresh start," Marlene said one afternoon as they posted notices for the upcoming summer festival. "People are actually smiling again." Ryan smiled too, but the truth was something still gnawed at him. Every so often, another letter would arrive. No return address, no signature, just the same sharp handwriting. "This community will crumble without me. Enjoy your peace while it lasts. You can't erase me." Ryan didn't tell everyone about the letters. Why stir up panic? Instead, he kept them locked in a drawer. But each time he read one, he felt Gregory's shadow stretch longer. Across the lake. One night, Ryan hosted a small dinner. His friends Marlene, David, and Claire sat around the table, sharing stories over roasted chicken and wine. Claire leaned forward. "Do you ever think about what'll happen when Gregory gets out?" The table grew quiet. Ryan set down his fork. "I try not to. But yeah, it crosses my mind." David sighed. "Men like him don't change. He'll come back angry." Marlene frowned. "Then we'll be ready. This time, the community stands together." Ryan nodded, but deep down he wasn't sure. Gregory didn't just lead with rules, he led with fear. And fear was harder to erase. As weeks turned to months, Ryan threw himself into improving the neighborhood. He organized lake cleanups, started a monthly newsletter, and even got a new playground approved for the kids. Neighbors began saying things like, "We should have elected you years ago." And finally, someone who listens. On the surface, everything was thriving. But beneath that, the letters never stopped. One morning, Ryan found an envelope wedged under his truck's windscreen wiper. "No gate, no cop, no election will keep me from what's mine." He scanned the trees nervously, half expecting Gregory to be standing there, watching. Of course, the woods was empty. That night, Ryan sat alone at his desk, reading the letters again. He whispered to himself, "Why can't you just let go?" The sound of owls filled the silence, but Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that Gregory's eyes were still on him even from a jail cell miles away. Meanwhile, inside the prison, Gregory marked the days on his calendar. Each X was a step closer to freedom. He grinned as he traced the dates circled in red. His release day, and though he couldn't see Ryan, he could imagine him comfortable, happy, unprepared. "Oh, Mitchell," Gregory muttered with a low laugh. "You have no idea what's coming." The morning of Gregory's release was gray and silent. Rain dripped off the prison gates as a guard unlocked the heavy doors. "Mitchell," the guard said, handing Gregory a plastic bag of his belongings. "Keys, wallet, watch. Don't come back here." Gregory smirked, adjusting his tie. "Don't worry, I won't." As he stepped out, the rain eased. A black sedan waited at the curb. A man in a dark coat leaned across the passenger seat, pushing. The door opened. "Mr. Walker," the driver greeted. Gregory slipped inside. "It's good to be free." The car pulled away, tires hissing against the wet road. Gregory's eyes burnt with a dangerous focus. "Take me back to the lake." Meanwhile, at the lakeside community, the air was alive with joy. Colorful banners hung between trees, kids raced each other near the dock, and smoke rose from barbecue grills. It was the annual summer festival, Ryan's idea. He stood near the stage, clipboard in hand, making sure everything ran smoothly. "Ryan," Marlene waved from a table stacked with pies. "This is the best turnout we've had in years." Ryan grinned. People needed this. It feels normal. Again, he looked around at neighbors chatting, couples dancing, and children playing. For a moment, he let himself believe the dark cloud Gregory had left behind was finally gone. Claire handed him a cup of lemonade. "See? You've brought life back here," Ryan chuckled. "I just gave people a reason to come together." As music filled the air, Ryan raised his cup in a toast. To a new chapter without fear. The crowd cheered back in the sedan. Gregory watched raindrops streak across the window. His mind replayed every humiliation, every moment Ryan had stood against him, the cop siding with Ryan. The election is slipping away. The night the neighbors clapped when Gregory was taken away in handcuffs, his knuckles tightened on the armrest. "They think they're free of me," Gregory muttered. "They'll learn soon enough. I built that HOA. I ran it with strength. Without me, it's weak." The driver glanced at him nervously. "What's the plan, sir?" Gregory's lips curled into a smile. "First, I watch. Then, I remind them who's in charge." At the festival, the sun began to set, casting golden light across the lake. Lanterns flickered to life, their reflections dancing on the water. Ryan stood with David near the dock, watching kids light sparklers. "You really think things will stay this way?" David asked. Ryan hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I mean Gregory's locked up for a while. We finally have a chance to build something better." What Ryan didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Gregory was already free. The black sedan slowed to a stop on a hill overlooking the lake. Gregory stepped out, his shoes crunching on gravel. He pulled a pair of binoculars from his pocket and lifted them. Through the lenses, he saw the festival in full swing. People laughing, dancing, celebrating. And at the center of it all, Ryan Mitchell, smiling. Gregory's jaw clenched. "Enjoy it while you can, Mitchell," he whispered, "because I'm back." The music carried faintly up the hill, blending with the night breeze. Gregory lowered the binoculars, his eyes cold with resolve. The festival roared with joy below, but above, in the shadows, a storm had already begun to gather. The festival wound down slowly. Music softened, children dozed in their parents' arms, and lanterns drifted across the lake. Glowing like tiny stars, Ryan stood at the edge of the dock, watching the last lantern float away. Claire slipped her arm through his. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she whispered. Ryan smiled. "Yeah, it feels like peace." Behind them, neighbors packed up tables, laughing as they carried leftovers and folded chairs. The air was warm, safe, and alive with the kind of comfort Ryan had dreamed about since the day he bought the cabin. For the first time in years, he let his guard down. Up on the hill, Gregory lowered his binoculars, eyes gleaming. He slipped them into his coat and turned to the driver. "Wait here," Gregory ordered. "I won't be long." He moved down the path quietly, careful not to disturb the gravel. His shoes found the familiar rhythm of the woods. These trails, these shadows, he knew them well. As laughter echoed from the festival, Gregory crouched near the tree line, close enough to see faces illuminated by lantern light. His chest tightened with fury when he spotted Ryan holding Claire's hand, smiling like he owned the place. Gregory muttered under his breath, "This was my kingdom." "And he dares," a child's laugh rang out. For a moment, Gregory's face softened, but then hardened just as quickly. "They've forgotten me already, but I'll remind them." From his coat, he pulled out a folded piece of paper. On it, in bold black ink, were the words, "The HOA never dies." He tucked it beneath a rock at the entrance gate, where Ryan would surely see it in the morning. Then, like a shadow, Gregory slipped back into the woods. By the time Ryan and Claire walked home, the night was calm. The moonlight danced on the water, and the air was filled with the scent of extinguished torches. Ryan kissed her forehead. "I'll lock up. You go ahead." Claire smiled, tired. "Don't be long." Ryan closed the gate behind him, and that's when he saw it. The rock looked slightly out of place. Curious, he bent down only to freeze when his fingers brushed the paper. Unfolding it slowly, his stomach tightened. The words glared back at him. "The HOA never dies." His throat went dry. He scanned the dark tree line but saw nothing. The woods was silent, still too still. "Gregory," Ryan whispered under his breath. The next morning, Ryan gathered the community. They stood in a circle by the dock, concern etched across their faces as he held up the paper. "Someone left this at my gate," Ryan said, his voice heavy. Gasps rippled through the group. Marlene crossed her arms. "It's him, isn't it?" "Gregory." David's jaw tightened. "But he's supposed to be locked up." Claire shook her head slowly. "No, he's out. This is his way of telling us." The neighbors exchanged nervous glances, their festival joy now shadowed by fear. Ryan steadied himself. "Listen, we can't let him win. That's exactly what he wants, to scare us back into silence. But this," he held up the paper, "this is proof he's out there, watching." Silence hung heavy in the air. Finally, Marlene spoke. "So, what do we do?" Ryan exhaled, scanning each of their faces. "We prepare, we stay alert, and we stand together. He may think the HOA never dies, but neither does this community." The crowd nodded, their fear tempered with resolve, but as Ryan folded the paper, he couldn't shake the unease gnawing at his chest. Gregory wasn't just out there. He was close, too close, on the hill once more. Gregory watched the meeting unfold through his binoculars. His lips curved into a slow, deliberate smile. "They found it," he murmured. "Good." He tucked the binoculars away and whispered to himself. "This is only the beginning." The lake shimmered below, calm and unsuspecting. But in Gregory's mind, the battle had only just begun. The next few days were heavy with unease. Neighbors double-checked their locks, children stayed closer to home, and every rustle in the woods set nerves on edge. Ryan barely slept. Each night, he stood at the window, scanning the dark tree line, waiting for a glimpse of movement. On the fourth night, his wait ended. The crunch of footsteps came first. Then the faint creak of the gate. Ryan's pulse hammered as he grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The beam of light swept across the yard empty. But when he turned toward the dock, his breath caught. Gregory stood at the water's edge, motionless, staring across the lake like a man returning to his throne. "Gregory!" Ryan's voice cut through the still night. Slowly, Gregory turned. His face was thinner, eyes wild yet calm in a chilling way. He spread his arms as though welcoming Ryan into his nightmare. "You see, Ryan," Gregory said softly, "I told you, the HO never dies." Ryan tightened his grip on the flashlight, his voice steady but cold. You don't belong here anymore. This isn't your community. Gregory's lips curled. My community? This was never yours to begin with. I built this place. I controlled it. Every board decision, every fine, every life in this neighborhood bent to me. And you, his finger jabbed the air, you ruined it all. Ryan stepped closer, his tone sharp. No, you ruined yourself. People got tired of your tyranny. They wanted freedom. They wanted peace. That's why you lost. Gregory's voice rose, echoing across the water. Lost? You think I've lost? Look around, Ryan. They're scared. Every single one of them. I left one note, and already they tremble. That is power. That is control. Ryan took another step. Forward, his jaw tight. Fear isn't power, Gregory. It's weakness, and you've got nothing left but that? For a moment, Gregory's face twisted with rage. He pulled a metal pipe from behind his coat and swung it against the dock post. With a loud crack, I'll show you weakness. He roared, advancing toward Ryan. Ryan's breath caught, but before Gregory could strike, voices rang out. Ryan! Stay back, Gregory. From the path, neighbors poured in Claire, Marlene, David, and half a dozen others, each holding flashlights, standing shoulder to shoulder. The beams lit Gregory like a criminal under a spotlight. Claire's voice shook but carried strength. It's over, Gregory. You're done terrorizing us. Gregory's hand trembled on the pipe. Hisses. Eyes darted from face to face. The unity before him seemed to rattle him more than any weapon. Ryan held his ground. You wanted proof the HOA never dies? Look at them, Gregory. We're not afraid anymore. The HOA died the day you lost control. What you're seeing now, this is community. This is strength. For the first time, Gregory faltered. His grip loosened, shoulders sagging. The wildfire in his eyes dimmed as the crowd's silence pressed down on him. Finally, with a ragged breath, Gregory dropped the pipe. It clattered against the dock, the sound final, echoing across the lake. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Moments later, red and blue lights splashed against the trees. Officers rushed in, cuffing Gregory as he shouted half-hearted threats. You think this is the end? You think you're safe? He bellowed, but his words sounded hollow, defeated. The neighbors stood in silence, watching as the man who had haunted their lives for so long was finally dragged away back at the cabin. Ryan and Claire sat on the porch as dawn crept over the lake. The air felt different, lighter, freer. Claire leaned against him. It's really over, isn't it? Ryan exhaled slowly, staring at the calm water. Yeah, it's over. For the first time since moving in, he felt something he hadn't dared hope for: peace. He looked toward the community gathering at the dock, neighbors hugging, laughing softly, and children playing without fear. The nightmare was gone, and yet, as Ryan folded the note, the HOA never does, a thought lingered. Gregory was gone, but his words echoed like a shadow in the back of Ryan's mind. Still, he smiled faintly. Because whatever challenges lay ahead, one truth was clear: the HOA was dead, but the community was alive. And that was today's HOA story. Tell me, if you found a note at your gate that said the HOA never dies, what would you have done? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, this was HOA Stories 87.
This was just one story, but the next one will be even more dramatic. Are you ready? Then you need to subscribe to HOA Stories 87 right now. Like this video, share it with your friends, and hit the bell because the next story might sound a little too close to home.